On a beautiful spring day in April, we buried my Uncle Frank here on Chaplain's Hill at Arlington Cemetery. It's exactly where he wanted to be, beside his brother, Chaplain Bob. They'd been apart for half a century. Now they're here, and they're here together.
The story of Bob and Frank is the story of two journeys that began in the same place and in the same way, and then they diverged greatly.
Bob Brett was the youngest brother in a big Irish family from Philadelphia. Born in 1936, in '62 he was ordained a priest at Washington's Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, 3 years after his older brother. 1967, as war raged on in Vietnam, Bob joined the Navy, arriving in theater with the 26th Marines in October.
He might as well have been God to me. I was 13 years old. Here was a man who was not only a priest, but also was an officer in the military. I mean, he might as well have been God. He was my hero. He was leaving to go to Vietnam after graduating from the Naval Chaplain School. And we had a party at my aunt's house for him, a going away party. My uncle came up to him and he was standing against the wall where he couldn't get away. And he said, "Bob, why are you going to Vietnam? You don't have to go to Vietnam. 250 guys a week are being killed in Vietnam. You're a priest, you'll never be drafted. Why are you going to Vietnam?" And Bob just stood there. And I was standing there with my aunt. After my Uncle Jim ran out of breath, he says, but Jim, that's where I'm needed. You know, when I was 13 years of age, I didn't understand the danger in that statement. Now, after being an officer in the Marine Corps myself and an adult, I understand the danger in that statement. He accepted the danger.
During the war, Father Bob performed nearly every sacrament imaginable, from baptisms to last rites, and Mass as much as 10 times a day. His bravery was admired by all of his men, and their love for him has endured long after his short life.
Years later, when they were going to name the Naval Chaplain School after Bob, and that was voted by his peers, by the way, they didn't choose Capitano, who was awarded the Medal of Honor. They chose Uncle Bob. His peers chose him.
My great uncle and his Marines were heading for Hill 558, near a place called Khe Sanh, a name that would be seared into America's memory just 3 months after they arrived, when the North Vietnamese launched a 77-day siege that would become one of the bloodiest battles of the war. His commander told him to stay at 558, but Father Bob always went where he was needed. And after reminding his commander of his duties as a priest, he set off to take care of his men.
He gave us a plenary indulgence, which means we were forgiven for everything we'd ever done, and he gave us communion. No mass, no ceremony, and then a couple words of encouragement.
The men who survived that day remember Father Bob and his friend, Private Alexander Chin, refusing to board the last chopper as the landing zone came under attack.
And the crew chief says, "Chaplain, get on the chopper. I can take one more Marine. You got 30 seconds to get off the deck before the enemy starts firing. Because they know where you're landed." And Bob goes, "No, let Pete go. Pete has the mail." Bob's thinking about his troops. He's thinking about other people.
Moments later, a rocket hit their bunker. And on that site, on February 22nd, 1968, my great uncle and 7 other Marines met their God.
I was just 7 years old, and I remember it was a cold day in February in '68, and the 3 black sedans pulled up in front of my house, and men with black overcoats over their military uniforms came up to the door to tell my mother, then 30 years old, that her brother had died in Khe Sanh, and they wanted her to come with them to tell my grandmother. They said, "Call your sister, Rose," and she lived very near my grandmother at the time, and said, "Call Rose and have Rose go over, and then we're going to go." And I just remember that the only words I remember my mom saying in that phone call were, "It's Bobby."
When word of Father Bob Brett reached the United States, his older brother, Father Frank, knew his duty as well, to go where our boys needed him. Against his family's wishes, he joined the Army, and in 1969, shipped off after his younger brother.
It was as if Bob's soul kind of became Frank's constant companion. Frank made the decision that he was going to go and honor Bob's legacy. And I can tell you that although we honor that choice today, it did not play well in Collingdale, Pennsylvania in 1969. His mother, his sisters were all still barely begun to heal from the loss of Bobby.
After he gave his life for love of his fellow man, the Navy honored Lieutenant Robert Brett with the Legion of Merit. 2 years after his death, his older brother earned the Bronze Star for valor in combat. For 30 years, Father Frank served as a military chaplain, and in 1998, when Father Bob's remains were reinterred here on Chaplain's Hill, it was my great-uncle who gave the eulogy.
And Frank performed the ceremonies for Bob's burial. And he started it off with, "This is not the first time I buried my brother, and I'll keep doing it until I get it right." And I thought, that son of a gun, yes.
One was a life taken, and the other was a life given in service of God and country.
Now today, these two brothers in family, honor, and faith lie together, united again after 50 years. Private Alexander Chin, who was with Father Bob until the end, lies beside them. And a grateful nation remembers them, and so many others who served.